Let me go across to former diplomat Prabhu Dayal, who's joining us on the show here. Many thanks, sir, for speaking with the NDTV. First of all, Prabhu Dayal, why is a joint communique important in the run-up to the summit in September? Why do we need a joint communique to be agreed upon by all the countries at these various ministerial meetings?
Maha, first of all, thank you for inviting me for this discussion. Now, a joint communique always indicates that there is broad agreement on various aspects of the meeting. And if there is no joint communique, then the opposite is true. In other words, that there is no consensus on the important points. Now, I may mention that at the recent meeting of the G20 finance ministers, there was no joint communique issued at the end of the meeting because there was no understanding or there was no agreement on certain references which were suggested to the situation in Ukraine, because I understand that Russia and China objected to any references. So if a meeting concludes without a joint communique, it is indicative of differences. And I'm sure that India's efforts would be aimed at ensuring that the foreign ministers' meeting comes out with some sort of a communique. Of course, India can only make the best possible efforts, but a lot, of course, would depend on the different parties which are involved. You know, there is no denying the fact that the G20 is a divided house. On the one hand, there is the United States and the Western allies of the United States. On the other side, there are Russia and China. And their points of view are poles apart. So it may become very difficult to bring out any joint communique purely because the Western countries would like to include a reference to the Russia-Ukraine war, and Russia and China will be opposed to it. Let us see what happens.
Prabhu Dayal, I want to come in here, sir, because I want to understand, sir, why China and Russia objected to the same language in the finance minister's outcome document, which was similar or rather absolutely the same, as India says, to the Bali Declaration. If they could agree upon those same points, the same language in Bali, why have they taken a different stand in Bengaluru?
Well, I'm not totally clear about what was the reason, but I can hazard a guess. Russia and China want to be less accommodative than they were earlier. In fact, both Russia and China said that the Western countries were taking a combative position. But on the other hand, Western countries are saying that the opposition of Russia and China was combative in nature, and that is why the G20 foreign ministers meeting ended without a joint communique. So there is a blame game which is going on. And this is natural, given the extreme degree of antagonism and hostility which exists at the moment between the two differing camps. India's role is to still try and make sure that the divisions are not allowed to come to the fore. In fact, there is the maximum degree of agreement and unanimity on issues, though I must confess that this might become a difficult task because of the situation on the ground.
So you are saying India's position is even more challenging than Indonesia's position when it held the G20 summit in Bali. Is it because we have seen the first anniversary of the Ukraine war over and no resolution coming through, despite the fact that there are hectic diplomatic efforts to bring this war to an end?
Yes, indeed. That could very well be the reason that with a year already gone by and the war still going on, the positions of both parties appear to have hardened. And this makes it even more difficult to work out commonly agreed language. So, unless something very, very remarkable happens, we might find that the difficulties which came up at the Bangalore meeting of the G20 finance ministers, these difficulties might re-emerge at the G20 foreign ministers meeting. The world is going through very tricky times. And I believe that if there is any country which is well placed to try and mediate and to try and sort out the differences, to try and work out some agreed language, then that country is India. And therefore, India's role will be very pivotal.
Okay, I'll hold on this conversation with you for just a minute, sir, because I want to also quickly take our viewers through the various bilateral meetings that the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar will be holding. About 39 bilateral meetings is what S. Jaishankar will hold. Some of the meetings are already over. Some of the crucial and critical meetings have already taken place. For instance, with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, that bilateral meeting took place this afternoon. Also with his UK counterpart, James Cleverly, that meeting took place, and in that meeting, the issue of the BBC tax issue did come up. As per sources, India has told the UK Foreign Secretary that Indian laws will apply here in this case quite clearly. But all eyes are now very keenly trained on one specific bilateral meeting of the External Affairs Minister, and that is with the new Chinese Foreign Minister, Qin Gang. What will be discussed during that meeting? Will the issue of the friction in Eastern Ladakh come up again? Remember, the communication lines between the foreign ministers has remained open despite the friction in Eastern Ladakh. His predecessor, Qin Gang's predecessor, Wang Yi, had bilateral meetings with S. Jaishankar in 2020, 2021, 2022, despite the friction continuing. But that clearly is going to be the focus as well tomorrow during the bilateral meetings. Let me quickly go across for a quick reaction from Prabhu Dayal, and then we'll go across to our exclusive conversation with the Australian Foreign Minister, Penny Wong. Prabhu Dayal, very quickly, sir, as far as the bilateral meeting with the Chinese counterpart is concerned, the issue of Eastern Ladakh, the friction, the border issue, naturally will come up, is it?
I would expect that it will, simply because it is a very, very difficult issue. And if the two foreign ministers are meeting, then they could very well be talking about it, because certainly the relationship is going through very tricky and difficult times. And the foreign ministers owe it to us to try and sort it out. So I know that Mr. Jaishankar is a very capable foreign minister. He is hands-on as far as his work is concerned. So he will not leave any stone unturned to try and take advantage of this opportunity. When he's meeting the Chinese foreign minister, he will raise the difficult issues, and that naturally includes the border issue, the border problem. So while I can't speculate whether any breakthrough will be made, but if the two foreign ministers are meeting, then the likelihood is there that they will discuss this difficult issue.
All right.